So welcome to the Node.js Node add-on API or Node API team meeting for November 21st, 2021. We'll follow our standard approach of looking at the board we have in the ABI stable node repo, and just getting to there. Let me share that. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Okay, in terms of done, I don't think I see anything there to chat about.
I don't think there are much updates.
Yeah, I don't think there's any update on that in terms of in progress. Don't think we have any updates on any of these. To do, sorry, I don't, yes, because I don't know if there's anything. I don't know that there's anything new in the to-do in terms of updates.
Don't have any.
Okay, so if we go into needs triage, I think the one would be good for us to chat about is this one in terms of clarifying the behavior. So I think thanks for, you've made a few suggestions, we've incorporated things. And
Yeah, I think originally we were saying that the call to the adjust external memory function should be in symmetric, but I think the updated was saying that the value in sum should be in symmetric. So I think that is addressing your concern that
okay,
what about the add-on calls two times on the function and the value in sum equals to the original one.
right. So like we could, if we make a suggestion.
I think we already have the word in sum in the existing words, right?
Right, yeah, okay, if I scroll up there, it says this function gives the runtime indication.
Yeah, this
Higher
function
up,
is,
yeah.
it's mentioned at the last paragraph, the last sentence. If it is a little bit up, yeah. If it is invoked with plus 512 kilobytes,
yeah,
it is expected to be invoked minus 512 in sum at a later time.
right. Although I think that that's still like I could easily mistakenly read that as like I need to do a plus 512 and a minus 512. So I would suggest just to let's see if we can see if we go here and we say if it's evoked with multiple calls that total. Like, did that fit what you think we're trying to say as well here?
Well, to be honest, I'm wondering what's the case that the add-on will call this function with different values that are not in symmetric, but they are eventually in sum equals. Because from what I'm thinking an add-on's case is that they call this function each time when they invoke malloc, and they call this function with negative value again when they free the memory chunk. So in that case, the two invocations should be exactly in symmetric. But if in any case, I'm still trying to imagine what could be the case that they might call this function in a very different manner, like +1, +2, and +3, and they call +5, no, they call -5 or -1 later, which seems very strange to me
So
that they have.
I totally agree that like most of the time people will do it in matched pairs, but I don't think that means we want to make it a requirement. Like unless we actually say no, you have to match them. One possible scenario I could think of is like normally you do the plus and minus, but like you're in a cleanup type phase where it's like, okay, I'm finished doing something and I've kept track of memory. And instead of making 25 calls to free to like basically adjust all the individual things, I just want to do one last one that says, I know all this stuff I've deleted, therefore just subtract them all, right?
Yeah, makes sense. But in that case, I think the current sentence is kind of covering that, right? Because it says invoke -512 in sum.
I think though, like I like you can read it that way, but I could easily see people reading it as like I see +512, I see -512. That means they need to be tied together, right? So just like it's just that, you know, so if we really don't intend that, I'm just thinking it's better to like the suggestion I have down here. It's like let's make it very explicit that like yeah, if I have multiple ones that total this, it's okay to do it. And I guess maybe even what I've gotten now says the other way, right? Which is not good either, right? Like um, this is so it's like maybe it's like add-on is expected to call this function symmetrically so that once memory has been freed, so that once memory has been freed, uh, that calls function so that once memory has been freed, um, the calls made to adjust for that memory being balanced that may be done with matching calls or I don't know, it's pretty wordy, I'll say.
Yeah, I think I'm still wondering if we should really want to cover all that details here
Maybe
because
we just say nothing.
e yeah, but in that case I'm wondering what's the goal of this podcast. Like it's clarifying the result value, right?
Right. Like I think before, like it's trying to say what will the result value be? And I think we're trying to say that there is a requirement that the result reflect the total calls you've made, right?
Yeah.
So like if I say +1000 +2000, I should expect my next result to be 2000.
Um, not what Node currently do, but that's optimal. I think.
What does Node currently do? Like I know we defer it to V8.
V8 just accumulates all invocations in one single counter. So we also adjust the external memory when we allocate a buffer.
Right.
So even add-on didn't invoke this function, the result might accumulate over time before because we allocated the buffer.
Right. Okay. So I think the current description that we have, the adjusted value, this value should reflect the total amount of memory with the given change in bytes included.
Yeah.
And like you added like implementations may use a single counter for all add-ons or a counter for each add-on. The absolute value of the return value should not be dependent.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, that you should not depend on the absolute value. It's only meaningful for a add-on to see what's relatively being changed.
Right. But it needs to be an actual value that goes up like, and I think what we've got there is like when I call adjust, if I called it with 1,000 and then I got a result and I called it with 1,000 again, and I would expect the result to be plus 1,000 as long as something hadn't happened in the middle, right? Like,
Yeah, exactly. We don't expect this function to be called across threads. So if we call if we call this function two times um at a um immediately one after another, it should
yeah.
be what you have been describing.
So I think what you've got, so what we do is like what we currently do today is we use effectively a single counter because that's what V8 uses,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
And in the future version, probably next VA version, we will have to switch to a counter for each add-on because V8 is deprecating the previous API, and
Okay.
V8 is demanding that we use a counter for each use case, each
Right,
use case. Yeah.
which seems useful, that seems fine. Is there any like can we imagine it being done any other way?
I just, I mean, we can definitely maintain a Node.js specific central counter, but I was thinking that a counter for each add-on might be much more meaningful in this API because for single add-on, they can actually depend on the returned result value because they all the accumulated value in that result counter is what they have been doing with this counter, not
Right.
others.
I guess we're not necessarily promising that though that they could then say
Yeah,
my
because we already have the Node.js versions being released out with a single counter, so we can't
right.
undo that.
Yeah. But also even if that number like because we will adjust it as well sometimes behind the scenes, they can't really take that result and say, "Oh, I'm just going to adjust it to 0," or
Well, it's purely for debugging. I mean,
right.
it's purely for debugging that if to see how many memories have been accounted.
Yeah, no, I guess my question was more about like have we narrowed it too much by saying like you can have a global counter, you can have a per add-on counter? Is there some other variation that we should allow that would make sense? Because like so far we've been
Um,
vague enough that you could pretty much do anything. Now we're making it much more specific. So like that'll be harder to undo later.
Actually, the primary intention that I made this suggestion was that add-on should not depend on the absolute value of this
Right.
result. What we saying that implementation may or may not use a global counter is that the reason that why add-on should not depend on it.
Right, okay, so let me then, here, I'm gonna take this and oops.
And
Like,
I was saying that because we are probably going to update this result value in a very in a foreseeable future. So that's why I didn't. Uh,
right, so I'm going to put this, like we could write it like this that says, for example,
or we can just say that the returned value is purely for testing or debugging.
right, that's kind of what I started with. Like it could be anything. Like, it could be
Well,
I
it's not. That's too
it's
loose,
too general. Yeah,
my
okay.
opinion. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not anything. It's just that your value has been accounted, but on a, well, I mean, if you request a plus of 1,000, it will
Yeah.
not be minus 1,000. It's just that
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
um based on a unknown value plus 1,000.
Right. So I think if we just take the same words and do it this way, so just the value. This value should reflect the total amounts of external memory with the given change in bytes included. The absolute value of the return value should not be dependent on. For example, implementations may use a single counter for all add-ons or a counter for each add-on.
Yeah,
Like
that
that's
makes
basically
sense.
saying like, don't depend on the value. Really, the implementation has a pretty good flexibility. It should incorporate your value, right? Like if you call it, it should go up by that amount, but it
Yeah,
could start at anything for any given call is kind of what we're saying, right?
yeah.
Okay. And then here's some
I th
examples. Like, and for example, why you shouldn't depend on it is they could do this, or they could do that, or they might even do something else, right?
yeah, and I think we can remove the last sentence because
Right.
it's
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. You're right. That's just, I already copied that up
cool.
front.
Yeah,
Okay.
I like the new
Okay.
version.
So I think like the question then would be with that, do we just delete this? Like,
Well, I think it's still a suggestion. Like we expect the add-on to code it symmetrically.
yeah, but like, is it a requirement? Like, are we just confusing things by
Uh,
like mentioning it at all? Because it's not a requirement.
it is in the future version of V8 because V8 will abort if the add-on decrease the value goes to down goes to under zero.
Okay, so that is a so that I could okay, that I could see as another requirement that we can say. So
But
like
I'm thinking that in that case we should another possibility is that we return a non-NAPI OK status because we said that the
agreed.
return status will be NAPI OK if it's successfully
Yep,
incremented, but if it's not, like if V8 is going to abort, we
yep.
should not abort and instead we should return a invalid argument.
Right. So yeah, totally. We should. So, but I think we could put in this then if that's the goal is like, let's see if I can get this suggestion in there properly, but like, okay. So it's more that what we want is this function is expected to be called, this function expected to be called in a manner such that an add-on does not adjust, so that does not adjust down more than it adjusts. Is really what we're saying, right?
Well, yeah, but I'm thinking,
Does not decrease external memory more than it has increased.
yeah, it makes sense, but I mean, it's a, it's not, it's not describing the optimal case. It's describing the bad case.
But what is optimal about making them matching, right? Like that seems
Yeah,
to be like it now forces you to say, like, well, I'm gonna have to keep track of each individual, like you have to do it the Malik Dialek way, right? Versus the I could keep track of like here's the total. Oh, I'm freed them all. I'm just gonna delete them all, right? Like which if we need to, we should say that, but like I'm just hesitant to add a requirement if it's not really a requirement.
oh yeah, makes sense.
And I think you're like it is a hard requirement that it sounds like, and it makes sense. Like you shouldn't be saying I've gone up by 1,000 and now I'm going down by 2,000 because that's just wrong, right?
Yeah, right.
And I think your point of like we'll maybe we wouldn't throw an error today, but it'll be better at some point we will throw an error, right?
Yeah, right.
So I think like this would say that without getting into like do individual calls have to balance out, do it just lets us say like don't go below zero, right?
Yeah, right.
So maybe I'll throw that in as a suggestion, and I didn't get it. How come I did? I'm gonna commit that, and I'm gonna delete this one. So I do have to run, but I would say maybe, if you can take another look at the wording and make further suggestions, like to refine this part. And then, it seems like we're pretty close to what we think it should look like. But I'll basically let me
Yeah,
know once you've had more time to think about what we updated it to, and then we can figure out what to do.
yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for your time, and thanks anybody who's watching, and we will see everybody in GitHub next time.